Hey, what's up, everybody? This is D back again with MKD58 Media. I got another movie review for you guys, and this movie review is for the 1987 Paul Verhoeven directed film RoboCop. All right, now RoboCop. This is a classic. I rewatched this about a week ago, and prior to that, the last time I had watched any type of RoboCop movie was probably like I was a kid, like I wasn't even a teenager. The last RoboCop movie I saw, of course, was RoboCop 3. And then after that, I was kind of fairly disappointed by that movie. And I just never returned to the RoboCop franchise. And it wasn't really a conscious decision. I never gravitated back to watch even the first RoboCop again. But I always kind of had certain memories of the first RoboCop. The main memory that stuck out to me about the first RoboCop was when Paul McCrane's character, one of the goons, gets into all the toxic kind of waste stuff, and then he starts to deform and basically mutate and kind of look like this just melting, creature type character, and then he gets hit by the car and gooberry juice goes all over the place. That was always the scene that stuck out to me most about the first RoboCop. But then just over the course of time of seeing little retrospectives and people kind of talking about the movie and things like that, I realized that there was a lot of scenes from the first RoboCop that I hadn't seen, or at the very least don't remember seeing. So it started to feel like a movie that I needed to watch again, because a lot of it was going to be new to me, or at least new again, if you understand what I'm saying. So I decided to go ahead and give it a watch. Now, this first RoboCop was R-rated. RoboCop 3 was PG-13, and that was part of the reason why I think RoboCop 3 didn't really connect with me too well. But so RoboCop 1987. This stars Peter Weller as Alex Murphy, Nancy Allen as Ann Lewis, his partner, Kurtwood Smith as Clarence J. Boddicker, one of the many bad guys in this movie. What's his name? Ronnie Cox as Dick Jones, Miguel Ferrer as Bob Morton, Ray Wise, he's a goon in this, and I mentioned Paul McCrane. He's a goon as well. Paul McCrane kind of looks like a cross between Ed Harris and the actor that plays Cheddar Bob in the movie 8 Mile. That's just an observation I had. If you know who Ed Harris is, and you've seen 8 Mile, and you've seen Paul McCrane, I think you'd be able to agree with that observation. But anyway, so RoboCop, short synopsis of the plot. It's about a murdered police officer that gets turned into a robot or a cyborg police officer in Detroit, and what is soon to become Delta City. So it's old Detroit / Delta City. And my positive takeaways from this film: excellent kind of dark, futuristic mood and atmosphere to this film, and a little bit of a kind of a cyberpunk vibe to it as well, which I tend to kind of like the cyberpunk aesthetic, especially the way it's presented, the way it was presented in the 80s for the most part. So there's that. Paul Weller's performance is another big positive for this film. He gives a very great, in my mind, underrated performance, especially physical performance, the robotic movements and things like that. Him and Arnold Schwarzenegger are probably the best kind of physical portrayals of a robot that I've seen an actor give. And there's moments where I would say his robot performance is better than some of the stuff Arnold did in the Terminator. But definitely got to give props to Paul Weller for his performance. It really sells the situation. So Paul Weller, a big positive for this film. This movie, just the efficiency of the execution in this film is just a really big positive. Same way I like to prop up Predator because of its flawless execution of its premise. Same thing here with RoboCop. Just very efficient, flawless execution. The movie is a perfect kind of runtime for what the movie is trying to do. Not too long of a movie, not too short of a movie. It doesn't really waste time anywhere. It doesn't lag anywhere. The things it spends time on, it makes sense to spend that time on it, and it doesn't spend too much or too little. Just a very perfect execution of the movie. Also, the R rating. I'm the first one. That R rating was perfect for the film. I'm glad it had the violence it did. It's some brutal, gruesome stuff that's going on, but it just makes sense for the whole story, and the setting and the environment. Also, this movie's loaded with despicable villains, and just loaded with corruption and greed and things like that. So it would just make sense for it to be as brutal of a movie as it is, because the mentalities of the majority of the characters that get a lot of screen time is a very violent, ruthless, brutal, greedy mentality. The city, old Detroit / Delta City, its vibe is very much like Gotham City, in that it's just a city that's loaded with corruption and loaded with criminals and bad guys in every direction you look, in a city that's sorely in need of a hero who's not just a traditional police officer. You need something more. And so it's very comparable to Gotham City in that way. What else? The score, the musical score. That RoboCop theme is one that I kind of forgot about until I watched the movie again, and then it brought back all kinds of nostalgic feelings and memories and things like that. So the score is a positive for this movie. What else? And then just I kind of talked about the violence in terms of the R rating thing. But just some of the violent scenes. I mean, it might sound horrible to be kind of like happy about the violence in this film, but there is just some kind of entertaining moments of violence in this movie. The ED-209, when it kills Kenny at the boardroom meeting. When whatchamacallit, the one goon that has the toxic waste death, and his body gets all deformed, and then that scene has always been kind of seared into my memory banks. And then, of course, Murphy's death itself. This was my first time seeing Murphy's death in full, the full R-rated version. And it was every bit as brutal as people were saying that it was. When Murphy takes down the two rapists trying to attack the lady, when he shoots through the one woman's dress and shoots the dude in the crotch or whatever, like, I remember that scene as a kid, and I remember as a kid thinking, like, man, that was a brutal. He shot him, in the stuff. Like, as a kid, I thought that was brutal. So, just some kind of good moments of violence in this film. I know that's a dark way to put it, but that's an honest way to put it. There's some good moments of violence in this. And some more observations. I got one observation that I wanted to make, and it's kind of the only negative takeaway from this movie for me. It's basically, and I never noticed it before, but after this one rewatching, it's basically his partner Ann Lewis's fault that he got attacked or got murdered like that. Talking about Murphy, because she essentially had to look at a guy's junk. Like that's what led to everything happening to Murphy. If you really pay attention to the sequence of events, because she gets the drop on one of the goons. He's taking a piss. He turns around, and it's like, do you mind if I zip this up? And then she looks down, and that's when he socks her in the face or whatever, knocks her out. She's incapacitated while they have time to gang up on poor Murphy and just destroy him all to hell or whatever. So that was always kind of, when I saw that, I was just like, I was kind of blown away by that. That's how they made that character get in that position, like she couldn't resist like looking at a dick like that. I don't know, that was just that was kind of a turn off to her character. It might be, maybe I shouldn't be sensitive about it, but that was like a turn off to her character. Like, really, you let your partner get destroyed because you just had to let your guard down by looking at some junk, you know what I mean? But that was just an observation I had, and it never really, unless I missed something, I don't think it ever really gets kind of addressed. I don't know how they would really necessarily address it in the film, but that was the only kind of negative takeaway from this movie, is that Ann Lewis, for all intents and purposes, is the reason that Murphy kind of got ambushed and killed. You know what I mean? So just an interesting, kind of an interesting thing. But anyway, so that's all I really got to say. Oh, one more thing. I'll point out the powerful line, a really good moment of emotion and kind of unexpected, you know, I guess depth is, for lack of a better word, when Murphy says, talking about his family or his family that he used to have, he says, "I can feel them, but I don't remember them." That movie, or not that movie, that line was, that was a strong line. That was a very strong line, and just an unexpected moment of kind of emotional depth and kind of heartbreak that I didn't expect to kind of get from this movie or from this type of movie. So that was a very strong line that is gonna I'll kind of remember that line, because I didn't hear that line the very first time I saw the movie. I was a kid, so maybe stuff like that it wasn't even registering to me, some of that kind of talk. But as an adult, that line definitely hits hard, and it's kind of a strong line in my opinion. But anyway, so my score, let me check my time here. All right, good. My score for RoboCop, I'm gonna go 8.5 out of 10. This is a classic. Like I said, it's a classic. I definitely recommend it if you're a fan. If you're a fan of like the Terminator stuff, because of the whole kind of similar themes and somewhat similar aesthetic, I do think you would like RoboCop. It seems weird saying all this stuff because these movies are old classics where everybody that loves that stuff is already very much familiar with it. So it feels weird to even suggest this movie because everybody knows about these movies. But yeah, if you're a fan of the Terminator films, obviously I do recommend RoboCop. Also, because of the satire nature and the dark comedy nature, if you're a fan of Starship Troopers, which if I remember correctly was also directed by Paul Verhoeven, if you were a fan of that movie, then you'll probably be able to get some enjoyment out of this RoboCop, the first one, because like I said, there's a lot of dark comedy and a lot of satire going on in this film as well. All right, you guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there. Don't want this to get too long. 8.5 out of 10 for RoboCop. All right, the first one, and in my opinion, probably the only one that's really worth watching. But I'll check out RoboCop 2 just to clarify that statement. But the way I feel now, the first one is a classic and probably the only one that I would really push people to check out if they haven't seen it. All right, you guys. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. More reviews to come as always. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm pretty regular with putting up stuff, whether it's a movie review or the movie fight stuff or just some other kind of random videos I like to put together. But yeah, catch you on the next go round.